up the podcast, Easy Allies podcast, about talk about news and things like that.
Talking about bad vibes.
Bad vibes. We're going long. We're deep into the podcast at this point.
Almost midnight.
Yeah, almost midnight, and we've only just done podcast halftime. But I like talking about this stuff. I like hashing out. I like having these discussions. Sometimes we need help with these discussions. Sometimes we need to turn to an expert. Previously, we called this segment Better Call Hoeg. Look, that's just stealing Better Call Saul. I don't like to... It's not even cute. It's not even Hoeg doesn't sound like Saul. I mean, it's not even close, really. So now this segment is called...
Wait, you know what Hoeg sounds like?
What does it sound like?
No. Do you know what Hoeg sounds like?
No.
Oh.
What?
Oh, I thought you said he doesn't sound like Saul.
No, I mean the word Hoeg doesn't sound like Saul.
Rogue.
Thank you, Jones.
Rogue Hoeg.
I want to work... No, don't do this. Yes, I'm doing it now. I want to work on a Saul impression. It's such a particular voice.
Yeah.
A little sick right now.
That's it. That was close.
All right, my goal for next podcast is to debut my Saul impression. Sorry, Huber, you won't be there. Help us out, Hoeg. So here's the interesting thing. So Rick Hoeg, who is a sponsor of this podcast, has interesting opinions on things, and it ties in well to what we're talking about this week. Rick posits that it's almost an obligation of some companies to make games that will make the most amount of money. And it's a really interesting debate. It's a really interesting thing to think about. He sent me a long description, a long article about kind of what this means from a legal standpoint, which Jones will read. And I'd like to discuss this. It's a really interesting perspective on all this. So Jones, take this away. Help us out, Hoeg.
The easiest way to think about fiduciary duty
fiduciary duty. That's the word I was trying to chase. That's too hard.
is to understand what a corporation is in the eyes of the law, namely a collection of money or other assets contributed by a large group, investors, but controlled by a small one, directors, officers. That larger investor group has contributed their money on the understanding that the company will put it to its best use to increase the overall value of the corporation. Example, to profit.
Yeah.
Doing whatever it is the corporation was formed to do. Because the investor group can't directly control the actions of the corporation, the law requires that the corporation's directors and officers always be exercising reasonable care to keep moving the corporation in the direction that the investor group intended when they put their money in, towards maximizing profitability. That is the board and officers' primary fiduciary duty. In other words, the duty of those in charge of a corporation to act as fiduciaries, trustees, of the funds that have been entrusted to their care. They are the guardians of the bank vault, and they can't simply waste that which they have been entrusted to protect. Note that in the past few years, various states have begun to grant corporations and LLCs the right to be formed with goals in mind, other than maximizing shareholder profitability. In such benefit corporations, other corporate goals can be pursued by the board and officers, including charitable and educational ends. No video game company that I am aware of is formed as a benefit corporation.
All right, we can pause there for a sec. I realized how I'm going to remember fiduciary just because of that fun word in the middle. Michael Huber. Mm-hmm. So do you think House Mark, is doing its fiduciary duty in saying, hey, it's our responsibility as a company, as people, we have employees, we got to keep everyone here, we got to make as much money as possible. Is it you kind of think it's their duty to make different games?
Yeah, depending on, I don't know the exact sales numbers, but clearly Nex Machina and Matterfall did not do well.
Yeah.
So they have to do something else.
And it's not just something else, it's like a different kind of game. Yeah. And I think we're going to get there with Hoeg in that there are games out there that are making so much money, it's kind of your responsibility to make that kind of game. And that's the crazy thing I didn't think about, is people decision-making from way up high saying we need to maximize profits and this is the way to do it.
It's just annoying because when mobile games were big, everyone's like, let's make mobile games. And then MOBAs were big, let's make MOBAs. Now it's loot boxes and royales. Let's do that.
Jones, we should continue.
So, the board and officers of a corporation always need to be considering if the actions they are taking with the corporation and its assets are in the best interest of the corporation's stockholders. What we are starting to see now in the video game industry are statistics, reports, and financial statements that show such high level of GAAP profitability over and above that
Games as a
realized by
service.
traditional single-player content. Sorry?
Games as a service.
Games as a service. That they suggest that every board of every video game company needs to at least consider whether the assets they hold wouldn't be better spent on pursuing games as a service solutions. For a board of directors to ignore this data would be to violate their duty to exercise reasonable care.
Isn't that ridiculous that this is almost like from a legal standpoint, EA, you have to cancel Star Wars? Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Now, there are plenty of reasons for a company to determine that pursuing single player is just fine.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Nintendo, you have the best single player developers in the world, so a one-time hit of Mario money may well be better than trying to build Mushroom Kingdom Live with expertise you don't have. If you are Naughty Dog, your shareholder is Sony, whose own shareholders understand both 1, that video games are just one piece of a much larger corporate puzzle, and 2, that single-player exclusives may well be a justifiable loss leader to enhance console sales. Finally, if you happen to be a true independent, owned by only a single individual or small group of like-minded folks, you can do whatever you want because the duty you hold is to yourself. There is no one to sue you if you aren't quite doing the optimal thing with corporate assets. So in short, most every company's board and officers, save for the true independents, need to worry about meeting their fiduciary duties, though some may determine that they meet them simply by staying the course. The present pattern of the data coming out of the industry, however, makes me sympathetic to the EAs of the world from a legal perspective when they see these tailwinds. I personally don't agree that we are destined for a games as a service only multiplayer future, but by law, these folks have to analyze the data they are getting carefully and consider the possibility. Clearly, EA has determined that games as a service is where the money lives.
Yes. Yeah. And many others, as we have talked about, are determining that's where the money is. Yeah, I love that. I love that this idea of fiduciary duty. It's not a thing I've ever heard of until this point, until Hoeg brought it up. But it's a perfect way to explain, I think, what we've kind of been talking about on this podcast for a while. That it's kind of, yeah, it sucks. We don't like to see that stuff in our games. It's ruining some games. It's ruining NBA 2K18. But it's weird because it's the responsible thing to do from a publisher, to ruin their games. That's what's insane. That's what's so crazy. I don't know where to launch from that panel. I don't know.
I'll tell you where to launch from that.
Okay, Jones.
It doesn't change how you communicate this to your audience. I don't care why you're making the decisions that you are. Communicate that to your audience.
Yeah,
we have the
and
wonderful
you've
Rick
always said
Hoeg,
this, which I like,
who's
yeah.
brought this down to a level we can understand.
Yep.
Who's starting to actually humanize these big companies. Where you're realizing, wow, they do have a lot of responsibilities, and yeah, they do have to speak to a higher power that is that is giving them the assets to run the business that they're running. And so it really makes sense, but we have to understand this in a situation completely outside of the messaging coming from the company in question. And so when I have a general understanding of how this business should run, how these tough decisions are made, and then see a company making announcements like everything is fine, we're not desperate, we're not chasing things around this industry. We knew we were going to make this decision years ago. No, you didn't. You clearly didn't.
Yeah.
And so I just want a little more of that openness, a little more of that fallibility with these companies, for them realizing this is tough. It's tough to keep a business afloat that's this huge, we're juggling this many, we're dealing with properties as scary and massive and intimidating as Star Wars. I don't get that vibe from them.
Yeah.
It just seems like they're staying the course, like you said in quotes.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, it's difficult because it's implementing these kinds of things into creative medium is not cut and dry. It could be very easy for somebody that doesn't understand film on paper to say, hey, like, if we get the actors to like just pitch about peanut butter in the middle of the movie, we can get that peanut butter money, but it wouldn't
peanut
work.
butter
Like,
money,
audiences
baby.
would just be like, no, this is stupid. Why would we watch something like this? It just starts advertising in the middle of the movie. And I think like a lot of the loot boxes is kind of that thing, but it's strange in video games because in some games it works and it makes perfect sense. Like Hearthstone, like that's how playing cards work.
Yeah.
Like that's just the business model that playing cards have had going for however many decades. And so you put that into a video game, it works, it makes sense. But then, you take that and you throw it into something like Forza, and it's like you just destroyed the whole way that like your
progression
system
Yeah.
works, and it doesn't really do anything that beneficial in the end.
This is a huge aside. You said for decades, and I wonder what the first card game is where there are packs, where
Sure.
it's randomized packs. Is it
I mean,
Magic?
is it just baseball cards?
No, you can't play a game with baseball
Sure,
cards.
but you
But what
bought
are you gonna
baseball
get?
cards
Yeah.
and collectible pack. Yeah.
I wonder if Magic the Gathering is like the first ever PAX game. Anyway, sorry, that's not at all having anything to do with your discussion, with your point, Blood, which I think is really strong.
I had collectible Rambo First Blood Part 2 cards.
Sick.
With a little stick of gum.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really interesting. I think you can't be too discouraged because of the way it ends, in that, hey, if you're an independent developer, you get to make whatever you want. You can go creative expression. And also on that point of exclusives and what we are seeing, Ghost of Tsushima exists not to make money. That exists to make the PlayStation 4 a more appealing product. And so it's allowed to be what it is. That title is bad. That's a bad title, and if you want to like make money,
It's a rough one, yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a good title. Excuse me for what I'm saying. It's a bad mass market title, and so yeah, I think that it's kind of along those lines.
It's weird seeing people that I know are so into that has now moved on to their number one anticipated game, and they're like, "Oh, did you see that Ghost of Tsushima trailer?"
Yeah.
It's like you are the number one fan for this game, and it's still tough for you to bark that out.
The Evil Within 2 single player game.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I wonder how Bethesda works
Packed
with this.
with
Yeah.
content.
Packed with content.
New Game Plus.
Yeah, but
Unlockable
Bethesda
difficulties.
has ZeniMax
Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
over them. Yeah,
Yeah.
Bethesda doing it right.
a lot of corporate.
I think Evil Within 2 is a really fun outlier. I think it's a totally fun outlier. I mean, I guess it's.
But I mean, it's not just that. It's
Wolfenstein
Doom.
2.
It's Wolfenstein doesn't have any
Doom
kind
had,
of packs.
Doom
right?
had multiplayer, but
Sure, but it wasn't the main selling point of that game.
correct. Yeah. But Wolfenstein 2, no multiplayer.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
I pushed my pocket too hard. Siri's trying to talk to me.
Talking to us. Yeah, I guess they
I don't
support
even
those
use
games
Siri.
with.
That's what I was like, what?
I think that they have pretty good DLC models with those games, in that they're kind of like story expansions. I think for Bethesda games, you get some good stuff.
Yeah,
post-game.
Fallout's had a lot of expansion model going on. Yeah,
Yeah,
and really successful in that.
Wolfenstein had its standalone
They've been,
game.
they've been trying to do the sell the mods thing. That's been what they've been.
If we get into the dirty business of
marketplace,
Bethesda, yeah. Which is funny. I think.
But
Go ahead.
No, I just love that so much more as a consumer. I love that I get this game, I can play it and finish it with no strings attached. I just get my Evil Within 2 or my Horizon, and I
Yeah.
play it and I have a good time. And months later, Resident Evil 7, months later when they release something else, then I'll come back to it and pay for the expansion or the DLC just like that, versus we want you to stay around, we don't want you to go anywhere. We got these progression boxes over here. We've got this stuff. We don't want you to go anywhere.
All right, so
And that's where it's going. It's going
Yeah.
harder towards keeping the gamer attached to your game rather than like, here, play it and come back to us later when we
So
release
let's-
more stuff.
Let's be
It's like-
bigwigs right now. Let's be bigwigs for Bethesda. We're looking at Elder Scrolls 6. It is our fiduciary duty. Sorry, I can't. Anyway, it's our fiduciary duty to optimize our profits. Skyrim sold very well. Look, that sold great, but we could make more. We owe it to our investors to make more on this game. Do they have to look at microtransactions for Elder Scrolls 6? Is that their duty?
Is their fiduciary duty?
I kind of think it's not. I think it's not because Skyrim sold so well. I think as you're saying like stay the course. I think for Skyrim you said that one sold bonkers. Like don't worry about
Multiple times.
Yeah.
The story of Skyrim keeps coming back again and again, and so
Yeah.
many the VR and the Switch and
Yeah.
this remastered and
So
That
it's
is their
interesting.
fiduciary duty is
Yeah.
to re-release it.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, you're kind of right.
Don't put it on every console right away.
Yeah.
Just do it.
If money's on the table, it's your duty to. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, because going again back to my dumb peanut butter money example, it's just it's one of those things where you also like you have to weigh the risks of like, is doing this going to cost us more
Yeah.
than we're going to bring in from it, you know? And I think that is one of the biggest difficulties with microtransactions, because it is sort of free money in a way.
Yeah.
It is like it can do like cost very little, have very little damage, and have very few people actually take up on it, and it's profitable.
That's what I meant to say when I was ranting about Hearthstone, which I have a very complex relationship with, is I would like to know the budgets and the costs to create these new cards, you know, because it's not some crazy graphical engine. You know, obviously you're paying for the programmers and the artists making the cards and everyone testing the new cards. Obviously there's a lot of stuff going on there. Voiceover. But I would love to know like the real nitty-gritty costs of putting one of those out versus people logging in every day, buying card packs.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I think that's why the Elder Scrolls card game is being made. I think that's why the Dota card game is being made.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's too much money.
Yeah. It's just too much money to say
much
no
money.
to. Yeah. You just got to find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
Because that's too much money to say no to.